Guys, we're going to do a video on the Deuterocanonical books, or the secondary canon, or the apocryphal books. And we're talking about not the New Testament apocryphal books, which the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, or the Protestants have not accepted. They have the same New Testament books, but the apocryphal Old Testament books, which the Jews don't have in their canon. We're going to talk about why we, as presuppositionalists, would reject the Old Testament apocryphal books. Starting off, if you think about, as presuppositionalists, we're starting with sola scriptura. We're starting with that the Bible is self-authenticating because it provides us with our worldview to understand how history is possible, how analysis of evidence, reasoning in general, how these things are possible because the God of Scripture exists, made us in His image, as the God of history. So we start with sola scriptura, basically. So when you follow the Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox churches on the establishing of the canon, they reject sola scriptura. So it would be a contradiction built into your system to start with, sola scriptura to lead to a conclusion that rejects the principle that you started with. So it would contradict itself. But besides that, we also can see in the New Testament that the Old Testament canon is spoken of as the law and the prophets. So all through, we'll put verses in the description below, but you see the Old Testament referred to in the New Testament as the law and the prophets over and over again, and that it's the totality of Scripture. And in some of the apocryphal writings, some of the books, 2 Maccabees and Ecclesiasticus and stuff, it mentions the law and the prophets as if it was a previous revelation. It doesn't include, those books. So that would be another indication that they're not canonical because the canon was closed with the law and the prophets. So it would be rejected on that basis. And when we see, our understanding of the intertestamental period from Scripture is that from Daniel's 70th week, we see that there would be no anticipation of a prophetic voice or revelation because Israel was under God's judgment for 483 years until the time of the Messiah. So after the commandment to go forth and restore and rebuild Jerusalem, we see Haggai and Zechariah prophesying, and that was basically the end. And they're the end of the Old Testament. You end up with Malachi, who himself in the last chapter ends with the law of Moses and Elijah the prophet. So the law and the prophets are in the very last couple verses of the Old Testament. So it kind of closes it out with that, and we don't expect or anticipate to see any revelation until the Messiah shows up. So God is, as His judgment would go, He hides His face from Israel. So we reject these canonical books the apocryphal books as canonical because, as presuppositionalists, we're committed rationally to sola scriptura. So even if we picked up any of the Bibles, the Orthodox Bible, the Catholics, or the Protestant canon, you can presuppose the truth of it, but the reason they included those other Bible or books into the Bible is they reject the idea of sola scriptura, and they establish the church as the authority over the Scriptures. So again, it would be self-refuting to start with sola scriptura to establish your worldview, to establish your epistemology, your framework to evaluate evidence, and then arrive at a conclusion later that rejects the principle that you had to start with, the foundation that you had to start with. So presuppositionalists would have to reject, if they're being consistent, would have to reject the apocryphal books. Besides that, there's evidence you can look into of some historical errors and various other errors contained in those writings. So let me know what you think down in the comments below, and appreciate you watching this. All right.